and welcome to episode 15 of HardcoreGaming101.net's top 47,858 games of all time podcast, where we objectively, definitively, and scientifically rank the games you nominate on Twitter. My name is Xerxes, and what about the credenza? What about the credenza? My panelists today are...
I'm Bobinator.
I'm Carl.
I'm Satenga.
And I'm Boz the Bold.
On this podcast, we have three rules. Unteto wogu ala. All rankings are final, official, and scientifically accurate. Ukubusa wesibili. You can nominate one game at a time via Twitter by hitting me up at GC9X. Wesitatu Ukubusa. You can nominate games that have already been nominated, but please don't nominate games that have already been ranked. You can see for yourself which games have been nominated and ranked by checking out bit.ly/47kgames. And that was a shout out to any listeners we might have who are Zulu speakers. The next game we're going to rank is Super Mario 64. It was nominated by @Magnesia_Nova and @EricWellweird on Twitter. Developed by Nintendo EAD, published by Nintendo on the Nintendo 64. First earliest release date, I believe, is June 23rd, 1996 in Japan. So, I mean, how do we start with this one? It's one of those games I feel like
biggest game ever.
Rank one.
Yeah, I don't know.
Top rank. We're done.
All right. All right. Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves here. We will have to discuss it before we. I mean, this might be a kangaroo court essentially.
Does everybody?
But...
I mean, I think this is one of those games where even not most, but many of our listeners will remember it when it was new or when it was announced. And
For me, I was a PlayStation child for a few years, but the local game store I used to visit a lot had the demo playing at all times on their TV, and it always looked really cool to me. I did eventually get it. I just forget when.
This was the first and only time I ever rented a system to play this game. I rented an N64 just to play this game.
what? You mean you weren't interested in like Wayne Gretzky's like super hat trick hockey or whatever it was?
3D hockey.
N64 is a pretty sad launch lineup, but this was the bright point in it.
Shadows of the Empire was there.
Yeah, I was going to say the Star Wars game was a big deal too. It wasn't a great game, but it was a lot of fun at the time.
I'd say Killer Instinct Gold is worth playing. I'm pretty sure that was launch.
Yeah, but it's a piss poor port of Killer Instinct 2.
I guess.
But
I mean,
was
you
fun
could
to
still
play.
go to arcades
different
at that
than-
point in time.
Yeah, but anyway,
I think what you think is in terms of launcher. Sorry,
There's
there weren't that many games over the whole period. Like for a year or something, I don't think there were that many releases on the N64. Just generally, like
it was
Mario
a while.
64 was.
There was like for N64, it was like there was one must-play game every 6 months, which,
Yeah.
if you think about it, is actually pretty normal. But I remember at the time it felt like we weren't getting enough. But we did get Super Mario 64 right away, and I mean this game was at the time it was bonkers because it looked like nothing else.
It wasn't the first.
It was expensive too. All those games were expensive compared to PlayStation games.
And
Yeah.
Much like the original Super Mario Brothers, it was not the first of its type, but compared to everything before it, like, say, Bubsy 3D, nothing really compares.
Well, that's like comparing gold to zirconium. There, like that's
What is
a
it,
pretty
like,
large gap.
Yeah, Jumping Flash. Jumping Flash was good.
Jumping
Flash is a different genre, though. It's not really.
Is it?
It's like it's a platformer in a sense, but I wouldn't count it as the same.
I would
Jumping
say
Flash is good, but not Mario 64.
Hang on. Let's bring the focus. We can discuss N64 versus PlayStation later, but we want to specifically focus on what made the N64 like the it console, at least for a little while.
Well,
It was never more popular than the PlayStation. By the way, it's just a PlayStation fight now.
Yeah.
No. We're not doing this right now. We're discussing Mario 64.
I would say Mario 64 is a game that the PlayStation couldn't do. You can look at every PlayStation game that exists. It couldn't do Mario 64, not in the way that it is. And that made a huge difference.
Mostly because of the type of controller that it had was completely revolutionary. Outside of graphics, you got to look at this was the perfect game to showcase the analog controller. that Nintendo had come up with. It wasn't the first system to have an analog controller that would go to the Atari 5200, but
Right.
nobody liked or remembered that. Nintendo knew that 3D games needed something more than just a D-pad.
This controller was basically made for the game.
Exactly, and
Yeah.
they continued that philosophy from that point. You can see, you know, the GameCube controller is definitely made for all of the types of games that they were making at the beginning of this GameCube's lifespan.
The GameCube controller, I think, was a little bit more forward thinking than this. Like, I think when they made the N64 controller, which I love for accomplishing what it set out to do, it was very good. But the problem was that they kind of assumed that, oh yeah, we're going to get lots of games like this. And no, actually, games like that are really, really hard to make. And most people aren't going to bother to do something like that.
The dual sticks was a significant improvement upon that design. The dual sticks, which have remained in gaming since then, rather than the analog and C sticks that set up. So I mean, it was a great forward thinking thought, but it got replaced very quickly by the.
I will say, I don't actually mind the 64 controller as much as some people do. I kind of like how you can hold in different ways and kind of have a different setup for different genres. I've always really appreciated that.
I think a lot of people that don't like the controller are people that came in from a different controller and were just like, I don't get it. I refuse to learn. I'm just an idiot.
It's probably the most natural controller that I can think of, other than maybe the GameCube as well, being how it fits your hands.
Right. The Z trigger button was especially cool because you do hold it kind of like you're holding a gun or something like that, but with your left hand. And you have that Z trigger, and that's still really cool. Like, there's no controller that gives you that kind of weird feeling of using your left hand to shoot. You know, that's just weird, but it works.
Well, I mean, it was really cool if you go. I mean, this is a completely different game. If you had like Perfect Dark, you could use two controllers at once, and you could basically shoot with like both of the sticks. It was really cool.
Oh yeah, like Robotron did that too, right?
So it's like a twin stick setup.
Yeah, GoldenEye has that too.
It does? I didn't know that. So anyway, back to Mario 64. I think we got
right. To move back to our current point, this game needs control stick. Like, I've played it without it because of the DS version, which I'm sure we'll get into later. It doesn't work nearly as well.
Yeah, that's garbage.
So, I mean, do you want to... Okay, look, I mean, we said most people have played it. Do you want to just go a little bit about what you do, what it is as a game?
Yeah, so, I mean, I want to go out on a limb here and say that I don't think that it is a translation of the core Super Mario Brothers gameplay to 3D. I think it's a totally different kind of game. And it's not really even a platformer necessarily, because the challenge of a platformer, it doesn't really work in 3D. And
would you say it's a little bit more like an adventure game in a way?
Yeah,
it's a scavenger hunt.
Right. It's a collect-a-thon type thing. I mean, it involves squeezing a lot of gameplay out of it. Now, don't get me wrong, they made a lot of stages, and the stages are very different and they're memorable. I mean, people remember stuff about this game now. I mean, who doesn't remember like the baby penguin, the giant like bomb king, like the chasing the rabbit through the castle?
It was extremely charming. Like, the characters that they came up with were so charming in that.
And they were smart enough not to try to they're like, okay, this machine has no texture memory, so let's just make everything kind of smooth and cartoony. And it ended up looking, it still looks pretty damn good when you play it today. Like, it does not look bad at all, in my opinion.
Play the Wii U version, by the way. It looks great on the Wii U.
So, and it uses the controls. I know that some people, I feel like Nintendo had the impression that people really did not understand the camera or didn't like how the camera worked, and that's kind of turned them off of making a lot more 3D Mario games. I don't think that's true. I've never heard anyone complain about the camera. It worked. Like, you had the C buttons on the controller, and it worked pretty well, like, for the way the game
I think one of the main things about it is that they never tried to put too many closed-in spaces. A lot of PlayStation games, because they couldn't do big open spaces without heaps of fog, they were always like in small confined spaces, which meant the camera kept hitting walls. Mario 64, it's so open a lot of the time. you can't get caught on anything. It's like, oh, I can sit behind Mario because it's there.
Right. The stage design, I would say, are more like building like a kind of like a playground with different obstacle courses in it. And so you'll have like, that classic first stage, the what's it called? The Bob-omb Battlefield or something like that.
That's a great first stage, by the way.
It's just a great first stage. It's got that great music to it. I mean, it taught you how to play the game in the way that all good Mario games first stages should, in that it was, it had all the basic stuff you could do in it. Like you could kind of like do the surfing on the turtle shell thing. You had the cannons. You had the, enemies that you'd do like the butt dive on their back and kill them that way and stuff like that. It was like I said, like a playground with a couple different obstacle courses built in, and you learned intuitively that, oh, you can get a star this way or that way. And they give you little hints about how to do it.
About the game's design I really like. I really like how it's not like other later 3D platformers where there's just like stuff everywhere. You just kind of have to scour the map for. You kind of got like a pretty basic point A to point B at most of the times, and you're just allowed to figure out how you're going to get there.
Right. It built a little bit on Yoshi's Island, which we talked about earlier, right? Because Yoshi's Island was the first to do it did the red coin thing, or did it do the... I think it was something.
Yeah, no, there were you could get up to 5 red coins in Yoshi's Island, and then I think that was expanded to 8 in Super Mario 64, which I think is the collectiest it gets.
It does. So each stage has a number of stars. They all have the same number, I believe.
Usually 6, and there's like a 7th bonus one you can get if you grab 100 coins.
You get 100 coins, right?
Yeah.
But they changed so much. Like, I'm really impressed with how Mario-esque the game feels without really doing much of the Mario stuff. There's no fire flower. There's no like stomping on turtle shells and like bouncing them off of things. There's not really that many enemies at all. It's a lot more obstacles than enemies.
At the time, I definitely found it confusing. I was like, where was the fire flower? You can find the there's a couple of Koopas in there that you can do like a whole like mini sub level where you slide down their shells, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
But it's not like a common thing. And, obviously there's not really a Yoshi character, and he was big in the previous 2 games. He was like a big part of them.
You have like brand new power-ups too, like the wing cap and the metal cap. And
the invisible cap, yes.
Doesn't really do a whole lot of really new things like that often, so that's really nice to see.
But it did still have like the same... If I were to compare it to another Mario game, I'd say it is going all the way back to the original Super Mario Brothers, in the sense that the original Super Mario Brothers was like, no, here's a platforming thing that you've never really done before. It's been done kind of, but it's been done very crappily, and we're going to do it right, and it's going to be amazing, and it's going to be this world that's worth exploring, is interesting. Then they throw stuff at you like the swimming levels, right, which operates on a totally different set of mechanics, but is still intuitive if you played the earlier stages of the game. And Mario 64 does exactly the same thing in kind of the same way. It's got some underwater stages which are very different from anything that Mario's ever done. You have you can run out of breath and choke to death, drown, which is really disturbing.
That is
I was actually
really
going to mention
morbid sprite.
I was actually going to get to that. I think that this game is tonally probably the darkest Mario game.
Oh yes, definitely.
I don't know about that. I mean, compared to say Paper Mario,
it's pretty dark. I mean,
it's definitely down there at least. I mean, the endless staircase, as fun as I found it, always gave me the Ghiblis. That music is just
and the eel.
Scared the crap out of me.
The evil piano. The entire Boo's house is, pretty creepy. And also, I always thought that the mood in the Bowser obstacle courses was really serious compared to anything else.
Yeah, and there's like a lot of mechanical stuff in a lot of the later levels.
Yeah, the giant clock is one of the last ones.
That mechanical stuff is a lot less cartoony than a lot of the other things in the game. Like, early in the game, you have all these, lush areas and things like that to go around in. And in the texturing that they use on there doesn't really fit with any other Mario games.
Satenga, I think you had a couple things you wanted to say
Oh yeah, gladly. Well, I believe there was.
So let's talk about, first of all, the name of the game, right, is Super Mario 64. There's no brothers in it.
Yeah.
And, I was really, everybody was confused by that because it's the first real Super Mario game that doesn't have Luigi in it.
I guess it's the first solo one since Donkey Kong Jr., so maybe it's like Mario had a heel face turn when his brother decided he was being, too evil training monkeys, so he decided to send him back on the course. So, Luigi might have originally been in the game. The programmers were apparently throwing around a split-screen cooperative mode that would have had the second player as Luigi, but being early N64 technology, that I guess they couldn't figure out how to make the cartridges powerful enough to run two separate screens at the same time. So Luigi was scrapped in the long run. I don't know if he can actually get his data if you search for it. Maybe somebody's figured out. At least
they would have found it. They would have found it.
Yeah, so his model's not even in the game. I mean, I
don't think it's there. I think
L is real.
Yeah, the L is real 24. I don't know if we wanted to explain that. There's this like weird little stone.
Star fountain, yeah,
the stone like in the fountain. L is real 2401, which some people for some reason think is a hint for unlocking Luigi in the game, but it's all bullshit. Let's be honest.
No, what that actually says, it's just it's kanji, right? Or not kanji, it's kana.
Has anyone actually tried the DS version of this game? It's not
for about 5 minutes. Yeah,
I bought it when I got my original Fat DS at launch, and so I have a few things to say about it.
It's kind of I guess not quite a remake. More like a director's cut of the original game. It has some interesting features. For one thing, you start off the game as Yoshi, who's got a different moveset, and you don't get Mario until a little while on. And you can actually get Luigi and Wario. And apparently there was a small rumor that you get Waluigi at one point. That died out pretty quickly. I'd almost say it's a better version if it weren't for the controls, which are just really tough to use, just a D-pad.
There's two different methods that you can control it by, and I think one of them gets quite overlooked, and I'll talk about that. So you have the D-pad, which is obviously not up to snuff because this game is all about analog control. But it does use the touch screen in a unusual way that nobody nowadays would think to use it that way. So when the original DS originally shipped, it came with a wrist thing that like a wrist string that also had a thumb pad on it that was meant to be used on the touch screen in addition to the stylus. So you were supposed to use this thumb pad, and you could get some semblance of analog control out of it. It's just that subsequent DSs were not shipped with this. So anybody who got onto the train later, which was almost everyone with the DS Lite, would never have experienced controlling the game in that way.
Right. The thumb pad basically made it control a little bit like touchscreen smartphone games now, right? Like it had like a...
It was smooth on the bottom, so it was it was very easy to move your thumb around on the screen. It was awkward in that it's in the middle of the controller, if you will, but it was a lot better than trying to do it with the stylus. And it was a lot better than the D-pad. It just was wonky and didn't function as well as an analog stick could. In fact, the Wii U port of this version of the game, both versions of Super Mario 64 are on the Wii U Virtual Console. It still has that intact, but it unfortunately, I wish they would have just tried to emulate that analog control, precision control, not with the touchpad, but with the analog sticks. But they didn't go the extra mile to do it, unfortunately.
Too expensive.
The biggest problem with the DS version when you're trying to sneak around things, because there are some enemies you actually have to move very slowly around, and if you're using the D-pad, the speed you go at isn't quite slow enough, so...
Yeah.
This, I think, is the first game released in North America that called Princess Toadstool Peach, which was kind of used as like her nickname in this game.
It was also
After that, it was just kind of like, oh, she's just Peach because
Well,
Princess
it wasn't the
Toadstool
first game, actually. The first one was actually Yoshi's...
golf game?
No, it was Yoshi's Safari, the not very well remembered Super Scope light gun spin-off of Mario that actually first called her Peach. I even have an image somewhere to prove it. I personally do prefer the name Peach over Toadstool. It's a little less mouthy, but I think Robotnik is a better name than Eggman, so... Mario got the better end of the deal when they did.
I agree.
When they did that.
Correct me if I'm wrong. This is the first time that Charles Martinet voiced Mario on a console game.
Console. Yeah, on a console game. I mean, he did do like some sort of PC Mario thing. Like, what was it called? Mario's Fundamentals?
Poker games or
Go Fish or whatever. And that was his first actual appearance. But as far as a mainline actual on a Nintendo console appearances, this is Martinet's debut, more or less.
To be as offensive as possible, they made sure that if you left your controller alone long enough, Mario would fall asleep and he would dream of pasta and
rigatoni.
Pizza.
Yeah, but you know what?
Two burly plumbers.
It is worth mentioning that the game really did know how special it was, even with that screen being able to manipulate him and do all that stuff. I mean, it was a gimmick at the time, but it blew everybody's mind to play with Mario.
Oh yeah, like before you select the file, it just has like the giant Mario head, and you can like grab his nose and stuff. And
it's a pretty good way to show off the hardware, show off how to use the analog stick.
Yeah, it was a way of like
better than Stretch Panic.
Let's rank Super Mario 64. I'm going to put this out. So right now, our top ranked game is Super Mario Brothers 3. I would put this game above that, and I'll tell you why. Which is that Super Mario Brothers 3, as great as it is, and it is great, is just a iteration upon Super Mario Brothers. It's not. It's a brilliant iteration. It's a very thoughtful, inventive, and attractive iteration, but it is an iteration nonetheless. And Super Mario 64 really is something kind of new under the sun. There were 3D games before it, but even after it, it took a long time Nintendo really didn't do that many 3D platformer type games, unless you count the Rare games, which I don't.
It's amazing how this game just came out fully formed.
Yeah, it feels like kind of like this is like there should have been another Super Mario 64 that was the first game, was kind of rougher, and then they came back and did this. But it feels, this is the Mario game, mainline Mario game for the N64, and it remains one of the best Mario games ever. And they've never quite gone all the way back to it.
Well, I would say that Super Mario Galaxy is a really great follow-up to it.
It is. Yeah, I'm not.
What? No credit to Sunshine?
Well, Sunshine is a better game. A lot of people have actually championed that game as of late, and it's not as bad as people.
I don't think anyone ever thought it was bad. It's just you can't compete with Mario 64.
It is good on its own merits, just in between the sandwich of Super 64 and Galaxy. It feels like there are some janky design points about it, but no, not
filler
bad.
in Sunshine than either of the other two.
Can anyone make a strong case for why this isn't better than Super Mario Brothers 2?
I can. I know it has been said, on these podcasts that I am not a big fan of the N64, and that's just really the hardware. And I'm not taking away from this game. I think it's a great game. I'm going to preface that. It changed the way I thought about games. Having said that, the 3D platformer as a genre has almost completely gone away. You have a few rare exceptions. You have Grow Up or Grow Home. Sorry,
yeah, Grow Up's the sequel, though.
Grow Up's the sequel, which is by all accounts a great game in the same kind of ilk. But there's a reason why this genre has kind of gone away, and I think it will come back once people have good ideas to add to it. But in the end, it is mostly a sandbox to try a lot of fun things. And those things were fun, but going back to it, I think, is less compelling. than something like Super Mario Brothers 3 or Doom. I think both of those are extremely addictive games that people still make content for.
Right. There's structure to them.
There's structure to them, and they're extremely addictive. You can do a lot with them. Super Mario 64, you get a bunch of objectives and you figure them out, and I don't think it's as addictive. And I don't think it holds up for somebody who's young, for instance, whereas Doom and Mario Brothers 3 would. Like somebody who's a young kid might have a hard time playing this game because it doesn't control like any other 3D game now. Not that that's its problem, but how different does it
control? Like, it's just the camera that's a little bit different, but the camera is only simplified. It's not like it's hard to understand.
No, but I think there have definitely been a lot of major strides in that area that kind of diminish it for me. I'm not saying that
I would say that if the camera operated like cameras do now, where you've got like free roaming camera that you control with the right thumbstick, it would make the game worse. It wouldn't be as, it wouldn't control as intuitively, because you get used to in this game, like you go a direction and it's like, oh, I can't quite see my guy the way I want to. You just press the one of the C buttons once or twice and it goes snaps right to where you want to be.
Oh, yeah. I do think that it was masterful in how it did that. In fact, the camera itself was acknowledged as a camera in the game. I mean, it's
which is really very meta. There's a guy following you around with the camera in the cloud. Yeah, I mean, and you can see him in that one part of the castle where there's a mirror. You can actually see him. He's always there. But to me, you're just making the case for why this game is so special and why it deserves to be on top, which is that no other game could do it. It's not like it did something and it's like no other game wanted to do it. It's hard to make a game like this. And even Nintendo did not want to, it would spend a long time and a lot of effort to make follow-ups to it. And I feel like that although there's kind of this feeling that it's not as accessible as like, say, New Super Mario Brothers and its successors, I don't think that's so much the case. It's just harder to make a good game like this.
We've seen how many games have spawned from this. Well, actually, probably more from the Rareware games, but this game had a part in it. We've seen that it's really hard to do well.
I mean, you have all kinds of pretenders to it. You had like 40 Winks. You had Jersey Devil. You had even the medieval games.
Gex. We could go on forever about Gex.
Yeah, I mean, there were
good games. There's
Toy
Glover,
Story 2. There were like Bugs Life, even there were tons of popular games from that era that copied this structure.
And let's not totally sell short like Banjo-Kazooie and stuff like that,
sure.
which were really good games.
Does Blinks the Time Sweeper rank anywhere on this?
I don't care. So who disagrees? I mean, we've got two opinions out there now. I'm saying it's on top. I guess Vice is saying it's slightly less than on top. It didn't really frame his answer.
I would say that it's right below Doom.
Okay.
I would go for number one. That's just me.
I will be honest. I apologize to anyone who thinks I hate Super Mario Bros. 3. I really don't. But I also think the game gets maybe a little more credit than is deserved. In comparison, Super Mario 64, I think, does get all the accolades that it does for really moving games to a place so far ahead that no other game ever since has revolutionized, really. I still think that it's really the beginning, in a way, of modern games as we know them even today.
Right. I mean, a lot of times when you see a game now that just shuts people up immediately, like, what is that? It's because it looks really cool. Like when you see a game that has like, oh, man, the graphics on this game are so good. That wasn't really the case with Super Mario 64. It shut people up because it's like, whoa, this is exactly what we imagined a 3D Mario game would be, but you never really thought it was possible at the time. It looked like a cartoon come to life, especially at the time. Now, not so much. But
that first time you flew in the wing cap was really magical for a lot of people, including me.
It's funny, like, because when the demo console was set up to bring this full circle, there was a single TV demo console set up to play Nights into Dreams, and nobody touched it. which is not fair to that game, but
Yeah.
it had like the 3D controller and everything set up for the Saturn, and it's like an all flying cap type thing, but that's all it was. And I think that's kind of the death knell of Sega and its design philosophy was at that time, because they did arcade experiences and they did them very well. They probably did them better than anybody else ever has or ever will. But you can't translate that into this like new era of game design. It just doesn't work the same way anymore. As good as Knights is.
Knights was very much an arcade game with arcade philosophies, especially
it's a great
from
arcade game.
Yeah. I mean, it's very addictive. It's fun. It's fast, but it's not a. How long would you say that it would take a brand new player of Mario 64 to play without any previous knowledge?
Well, I can tell you,
it's a 20-hour game, right?
Yeah, I mean it's a big game. There's a lot to see. There's a lot to do, and it's fun to do. And it's just like, even when I play it now, like I pick it up to just like I'm just going to play this game a little bit to remember how it works, and I get sucked into it. I'm like, I got to get the next star. Like I got to do the next thing. No matter how many times I've done it, I get into it.
I think it's that
I want to hear what Cal has to say, actually.
Oh, okay. Cal?
Do you? I mean, like, you guys have said most of what needs to be said.
Okay, so we've got 2 votes for number 1. We've got 2 votes for Below Doom, I think, right?
Wait. Didn't Bob say that?
Yeah, number 1.
Bob said number 1. You didn't say number 1, Batinga.
You know,
that's right.
You know, I am honestly going to say number 1, except for Super Mario.
So
Below Super Mario World, it's my second favorite Mario game there is. Honest.
Okay. So it doesn't matter what Cal thinks. It's
I know. I knew that was coming in, though. Like, there's no way. I mean, the short of it is, you were mentioning this, and I will iterate just a tiny bit. Super Mario 64 is one of the first games that I would say, one of the last games that came out as a game that was like, wow, this game's going to be amazing. And it was amazing. Games now, you're always like, oh, that looks good. I bet it's going to be crap. Like, that's how you look at
everything.
hype.
We've seen this with No Man's Sky recently, where it's like, this game doesn't deliver on like 100% of its magical promise that they didn't actually totally promise. And
the way I see it, this game basically just instantly created a massive, for the time, subgenre. That's a big deal.
Definitely.
I wouldn't say it's a subgenre. It was like, okay, well, this is how you make 3D platformers, and everyone was just like, oh wow, that is how you make 3D platformers. I guess we're gonna do that for the next 20 years. Like,
and then they tried it and failed miserably, and now kind of nobody wants to make those games.
I mean, you could even argue that the philosophy of how you have to collect things in 3D worlds all stems from this. Like, any Assassin's Creed game wouldn't exist without this game.
Achievements in themselves, like, as in the thing that people like for some reason, that's all this game is. It's a set of achievements. You just get them, and then the game's okay, you got enough achievements, go forward. Like, that's it.
But part of the fun of this was like kind of exploring how you would get that, because they'd only give you a little bit of a hint. Like, usually it was just like you'd select a star on the starting screen.
Yeah,
and it would
just
have
the
like
name
some
of
kind
the hint.
pithy little kind of clever-ish name for what that star was, and you're supposed to figure it out. But anyway, okay, so number 1.
Yeah, I wouldn't fight that.
Our next game is Master of Magic, which was nominated by GB Mento on Twitter. Developed by Simtex, is that correct? Published by Microprose for MS-DOS. Its first release date that I could find was September 1994, although who knows how accurate that is.
That's the accepted one. People seem to agree that that's when it came out.
Tell me about this game, somebody who played it.
I'm happy to talk about it.
Let's get.
I'll do what I can, but Cal's probably going to be our major expert for this one.
It's probably like most commonly summarized as sort of Civilization mixed with like a fantasy sort of game. Like you basically have different territories that like different cities that you make, and then you build units, you build more cities, you try and capture ground, you try and kill all the other people, and then you win. Like that's it. There's some minor diplomacy. The catch is you play as wizards. That's why it's Master of Magic. So it's all sort of, you get magic spells that take up the space instead of your civilization evolving. Like in Civilization, you just get spells. So you get spells that make your units more powerful, or spells that, I don't know, enchant roads or do all this sort of crap. And it's incredibly complicated to the extent that when it came out, this game was just like unplayable garbage, which is very, very typical of a PC game that was like super difficult and complicated. Like not difficult to make.
Of the gold box games, you know, the Dungeons and Dragons games of the day, or even like Daggerfall or something like that.
Right, yeah, like anytime one of these games came out, it was like, wow, it's going to be amazing, and then it would be like, wow, it's amazingly buggy, and you can barely play it.
There are so many of those PC games that no one remembers because they just end up being buggy messes.
There was definitely a lot of bugs to the extent that, you know, no one in their right mind would play an old version. They did patch this game several times to version 1.31, I think is the last official version, and there's a couple of fan patches that you can get if you really want. I don't know how many game breakers there were, but the AI was really, really bad in version 1.0, so it was kind of like you didn't have to play very hard to win.
I think there were definitely some ways to exploit sort of the game's own inherent workings. Like I don't know exactly how it works, but like if you know how to play alchemy just right, you can just kind of feed gold and mana on this like never-ending loop that just keeps increasing both of them to ridiculous degrees, and then you're just set for the rest of the game. You're never going to lose at anything again.
Does GOG version still include that?
The GOG version is 1.31. I don't believe they even let you download an earlier version. So yeah, they don't have the fan patches on GOG. You'd have to get those if you really wanted. But yeah, this is the kind of game that's ridiculously, like, it's crushing itself under its own weight, because what happens is you have the capacity to, this is an example, you can get a character that has regeneration abilities, and then you can make them undead, and then they'll be able to and undead units can't regenerate their health, so they normally just die. But if they have regeneration, you have an incredibly powerful unit who's immune to a whole bunch of things, who also regenerates health, and it's
that's the same kind of loop that Magic the Gathering games can get into, but it's in a video game.
It has so many they put so many little knobs and switches in the game's code that it's like if you flick enough of them in the right way, everything just kind of goes crazy, and you can build roads on water even though you're not supposed to. You can cheat to do that. You can enchant units to build things in weird orders. You don't necessarily pick up on this very quickly, but it's all there. It's like this incredibly complicated thing. So what you do is when you start the game, you pick a wizard. You can build your own wizard from a bunch of different like cool graphic like portraits, which are really nice. And then you can pick from a bunch of spells, spell books that dictate spells you get. Yes?
I should note, by the way, this game has a dragon guy in it, and for that it gets 10 free ranks automatically.
Yeah, and one of the wizards is named Lo Pan, so someone on the development team had to be a John Carpenter fan. Also, Horace is the biggest goddamn dork. He looks like he should be, like, the lead character in a 70s musical about Jesus or something like that. He's just...
He's a great character. I like Horace. He looks great.
I don't know if you insist.
A couple of the characters were also references to Record of Lodoss War. I don't know if I pronounced Lodoss right, but yeah, they've got anime references in there with one of them's named Kali, who looks exactly like Kala from Lodoss War, and there's a guy called Torin, who looks exactly like Wagnard, which is a terrible name for a wizard, but...
Nard.
Yeah, so, I mean, they had, like, a lot of cultural pop influences on their wizard portraits, which look really great. And, like, this game, it's a 4X game. I don't know if I really went over that adequately, but it's a 4X. If you understand what a 4X game is, it's one of those where you play as wizards.
I want to say the best known would probably be XCOM, and this game does share, I think, some familiar points with XCOM, but I don't know. Would you say it's more complex than that?
It's one of those games. It's complex in its in certain ways. The combat is kind of less complex because it's just two armies just kind of meet on a field and then you just kind of send them against each other. If you played Sword of the Samurai, it's kind of like that.
I do want to say I kind of like the same combat system. It's not just mashing one unit into another like in Civ. It's actually kind of its own separate screen where you can actually affect the battle with spells and such, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, they've built a lot of there's put a lot of effort into the combat system. It can still be kind of cheated out, but you've got crazy things like you can have invisible units. So you can have units that are invisible, and then you need to cast a spell to make them visible, or else you won't see them until they're actually attacking you, right beside.
I'll be honest, I couldn't really get into the actual combat itself. I usually just set it to auto, usually after casting like a elemental spell or whatever, but I'm not a big fan of most PC RPG combat in general anyway, so this was a little more original than stuff at times, just not my thing for the most part.
It really depends how dry you like your combats, I guess. Like,
not dry at all.
Civilization is very, it's very simple, very basic. Things just knock against each other. This game, it's a little dry. It takes a little long to do a single combat, but it's not as overwhelmingly complicated as some of the more complicated strategy games out there, which I think is nice. I think it hits a decent balance between the two.
Well, that's fair. But you do, from what I understand, have to be very patient to do well in this game. In fact, you should basically just not interact with anyone at all for the first 100 turns and just build up your resources.
Now, that actually brings me to a weird point. I don't know if I was doing something wrong. I might have, maybe because I was playing the easiest difficulty to get myself used to the game. I never met another opponent, and I was sure I had set it to 4 opponents, so I don't know what's up.
Bob has hit one of the game's known bugs. The game has 2 different planes of gameplay existence, which is kind of cool. There's Arcanus, which is the basic human world with normal stuff, and then there's Myrror, which is where a bunch of really fantasy characters live, like dragon people and I forgot the rest of them, but there's 5 fantasy races that live there.
It's basically the Upside Down for those of you who have seen Stranger Things on Netflix.com.
And I hope we're getting paid for that.
No, I just really like that show. Sorry, carry on.
And so you actually can shift between the 2 planes, which means there's actually 2 whole different areas to sort of control and overtake. I think they're mirrored from each other, so they're kind of the same. They occupy the same space mostly, but not always. It's kind of slight overlap. Anyway, if you play on one of the very, very easy difficulties, and you pick the dragon wizard, whose name I've briefly forgotten, the AI cannot pick cannot pick the character you have picked. And he's the only one that starts on Myrror. So if you play on easy, the AI will only use other pre-made wizards, which means no other wizard can physically be on Myrror. So you basically...
Myrror is the weird alien plane, right?
Yes. So basically you set the game to not let you.
I went over this to Tenga, and I don't think I was there, because the water was blue.
No, you're there. The land is different.
I could swear the water was purple. That shows how much I've been in Myra. I'm sorry.
It's a purple... Myra is purpurply blue water with kind of brownish land, I think, or grayish land. And the normal human world is green and blue.
They do look different.
You were on Myra. I had a look at your save file. You were on Myra.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. So, yeah, I mean, do you have any questions about this, Xerxes? Because...
one or both hemispheres of my brain just shut down during this.
Mine too.
Welcome to strategy.
What makes this okay? So, as far as strategy games go for this period, what makes this special? What makes this different? Is it just that much more complicated, or is it?
It's not that much more complicated because it's not overwhelmingly more complicated than Civilization or Master Orion. It's made by the same people that made Master Orion. It was kind of the follow-up in a lot of ways to Master Orion for them. So I guess you could say people were really enthusiastic for this game when it was coming out because, Master Orion was huge. I mean, what really makes it different is I think this was one of the first, if not very close to the first, sort of Civilization-type game that was set in a fantasy universe. Because it's, obviously Civilization is quite grounded and realistic,
I mean, Nuke Gandhi, there's nothing fantastic about that. It's just
Also,
It is fantastic.
One thing that's interesting that the Clack-On, the bug race from Master of Orion are in this game.
Oh yeah, and also the evil wizard Arjak looks a lot like whatever the spy race was. What are those called? The Dutch?
Darlocks?
The Darlocks, yes, exactly. So, yeah, I almost wanted to compare Master of Magic directly to Master of Orion, but I feel that might be a bit of a fallacy since, one takes place in space and the other's on...
It's a fair comparison. It's a follow-up in a lot of ways.
But, I mean, is like Master of Magic's like battles? Are they more intricate or more...
The battles are definitely more intricate, because your wizard has the ability to cast spells, and so do some of your hero characters. You get hero characters who gain levels, which is a kind of another difference that's very not in a lot of other strategy games at the time.
They're kind of in Masters of Orion, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so they can cast spells, you can cast spells, you research spells, and so you have all this, you can cast, general magic spells or unit summoning spells or stuff directly within combat, so you get kind of like this. You can focus on sort of more researching magic, or you can sort of focus more on building military sort of stuff, and you can focus on destruction magic or enchantment magic, depending on what wizard you pick or what you build. So there's a lot of options within the game to sort of hash out how you play. Yeah. And that is kind of similar to Master of Orion, in that Master of Orion, every race, just like in Master of Magic, has they have racial traits and they have unique things that they build. So it kind of has that as well, but in a fantasy setting and more like Civilization, because obviously Master of Orion, you're just moving between planets rather than a sort of world map.
What I appreciate go ahead.
No, that's it.
What I appreciate, there's two distinct ways to win, much like Civ. You can kind of focus more on diplomacy and making sure people don't kill you and save up for the Spell of Mastery, which is the equivalent of getting the space victory in Civ. Or you could just be boring, just kill everybody.
And a cool thing is when you take over a city in this game, you don't take it over with your people. You capture it and get other people's characters. So you basically enslave other races as you play.
Right,
which is really
Masters
cool.
of Orion.
Yeah, so it's got that same sort of functionality to it, which is nice. I mean,
I'm thinking based on everything I've heard.
Wait. Can I just get one more thing? I will say that while Master of Orion wasn't necessarily my favorite game, I do feel that it had more things going for it simultaneously than Master of Magic. I mean, Master of Magic itself, it can do a lot of complex things, but it kind of ultimately ends up as being a war game by the end, and I think I was a little misled. I was hoping there'd be a way to just win through being a peaceful agricultural farmer and just get really rich and move off the planet. But I don't know, maybe I'm expecting too much from it. I probably have my criticism off base.
I am totally inept at having an opinion about this game because first of all, it's not my type of game, and I haven't played it, so I'm going to be inept here.
So let's. I'm thinking NFL Blitz territory. I don't know.
The only other game we can really compare this to is Advance Wars 2, and that's kind of handles the same thing in a different way.
And it's much more poppy.
Too different. Yeah.
It's much more poppy. I mean, the level of complexity isn't nearly comparable.
Since it's kind of it's a 4X game, though. You can compare it to games that aren't on the list and just think how much does it do?
I was saying that it looks a lot like Warcraft 1 mixed with something like Romance of the Three Kingdoms.
As a game, it is often considered not quite. It's very close to unparalleled in its at its time, obviously, because it's there's not huge amounts of other games that were this complicated. I have seen some really negative reviews from the time as well, which was really amusing. A guy was incredibly angry about this game. This is a very period game. This, they wouldn't make this exact game now. It's kind of got the complicated bits are in weird directions, and it's really kind of difficult to learn. And it's you try and play it, and you can't make sense of it without kind of digging through the manual and a wiki and all this stuff to try and get the game, which is why a lot
XCOM
of
is
people
like that too. The original XCOM's very much like that.
Yeah,
Well-
like there's some Master of Magic kind of type games that have since come out, like Fallen Enchantress and I think Endless Legends to an extent, where these games have taken the formula, even though it's a different game, and kind of modernized it in a way that you can sort of get it a lot better, like modern XCOM, which is much easier to sort of grasp than XCOM original, even though it also loses a bit in that translation, I think.
So how about below Clash of Demon Head?
I think it's way better than that.
You know, I would also agree. Like, I'm somewhat familiar with the genre. I played Civ 5 and Stellaris, to name a couple games, and I mean, I'm not great at it. There's a lot of things I don't get, but it's pretty polished for the time period. I like how helpful it is to the information it gives you. So I'd say, for example, the genre it should do pretty okay.
I mean, as far as what you guys are saying about it, and you're better experts than I am, Donkey Kong Country 3 is not the best platformer in the world. So, like, it's not even in the same conversation in terms of quality of its own thing. So it's definitely above Donkey Kong Country 3.
I was going to say, I don't know if this sounds a little arbitrary, but between Tapper and Zookeeper, both are old-timey arcade games, I feel that, yeah, there is really a lot of nuance and interest in the content in the game, but it is also kind of a hard sell for most modern audiences, but I don't want to discredit the sort of game it is either, so...
Cal, can you live with that?
I would prefer to see it below Snatcher. That's where I would put it.
Between Snatcher and G.I.
Well,
Joe.
I wouldn't agree to put it that high, and it sounds like nobody else would either. So
I like G.I. Joe better.
Right now.
You know what? I would live with it.
I have no preference either way, to be honest. I mean, I'm on the borderline where I'm not as much of a hater as Xerxes or Vise is, but at the same time,
hater. I just don't see what.
I mean, you're a hater. You don't see it. You hate it.
I mean, I don't. These are also
either because like I'm gonna give it a fair shake and say that this is more your type of game than it is mine. But if I have any sort of weighing opinion, I'm gonna say that I don't like it for a lot of reasons that a lot of other people won't like it. Not that that's a qualification on the best games of all time, but it should be, because you're thinking about enjoyment.
There's also an element to this, which is like most people haven't played this game, and you do kind of want to promote games that are interesting that most people haven't played.
Sure.
We don't want to just be like throwing, softballs the whole time. Like, what's the point of having a contentious and completely scientific ranking system if you're not going to encourage people to try stuff that they wouldn't normally try? And that's what makes me feel like, well, there could be a lot of people out there who'd love this game, but they'd never try it unless somebody told them, hey, you should try Master of Magic.
Sure.
You know what?
I would definitely say, like,
really
if you liked Master of Orion, or you liked any of these sort of like 4X games and you hadn't played this game, I'd be like, well, you should go do that, because you might really like it.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
I
between Tapper and Zookeeper, or below Zookeeper and above Pulseman?
Wait, hang on. I am not the biggest fan of these types of games, but I'm going to acquiesce to Cal's own suggestion of between Snatcher and G.I. Joe, because I really somehow just think it deserves more respect, and Xerxes, you just made a good case of bumping it up a couple notches, I feel. So
I'll agree with Tango.
Outvoted.
Can I have a quick thought here? The only kind of game that I remotely kind of like this, would you even say is kind of like it? It may be at least concept, is Star Control 2. Is there any? I know it doesn't have the action element, but it sure has diplomacy and the gaining of friends and things like that.
Well, Star Control 2 it has a similar feel because it came from a similar period of games.
That's what I'm thinking.
But Star Control 2 I would definitely be higher. Like, Star Control 2 is a very, very impressive thing. But,
I'm just saying I get the kind of vibe from it. It's not in exactly the same wheelhouse, but it's getting there at least. But we can all agree that Star Control 2 is going to be up high. But yeah.
So Master of Magic above G.I. Joe and below Snatcher.
Yeah, sure. I don't see why not.
I can live with it.
Just weird thing, man. Okay.
You're just like
All right.
sweating like, I can't believe this is
So
happening.
it is. Yeah, let's move on.
All right.
That's all for this episode of Hardcore Gaming 101.net's Top Games Podcast. Special thanks goes out to at Magnesia Nova, at Eric Wheelweird, at GB Mento for nominating those great games. And thanks as well to those of you who we didn't get to yet. We hope to get to you soon. And thanks as well to my lovely co-hosts and compatriots, our editor Jeff Rudd, our theme song composer Muteki, and of course the support and feedback of listeners like you. You can support this podcast by making a small monthly donation at patreon.com/HG101. I know I did. And by subscribing to our YouTube channel and by following at HG_101 and at GC9X on Twitter. But most importantly, help us claw our way into the zeitgeist by getting on iTunes, subscribing to HG101, and giving us a 5-star review. And by the way, I'm going to start letting those people, if you do a 5-star review and I see it, and you nominate a game in that, I will guarantee you that we will do that game. So just a heads up, everybody. And you can edit old reviews, by the way, to do that. So I will check it out. Do it, or don't. What do I care? I'm just doing this to hear myself talk. Until next time, keep keeping it real.